Oh wow, that was quick. Variants already in there, first in the room. Hello and welcome everybody. This is the Political Matrix. I am your host, Young Morpheus. My phone is going off a little bit saying hello. And I'm here with my good friend and co-host, colleague, Mr. Cy Lawson. How we doing, brother?
What's going on, Marcus? Just relaxing, just here on a Saturday night.
Yeah, so we got to talk about obviously the top news which is going on, which was obvious and predictable, which we've talked about before, that they're going to waste all this time and money and Trump is still going to be acquitted. So now that it's actually happened, what are some of your thoughts, and like like to expound a little bit on the whole acquittal, the whole charges being up, if you want to talk about the whole procedure, how it was done, or things they could have did differently, or just, hey, the floor is yours, sir. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, outcome was all the way predictable. One, we knew the Republicans, not all of them, were going to go along with trying to convict him. I mean, many of them, they're politicians, right? They have to know that there's a lot of people who like Trump who will continue to support him. For them, voting against him is the end of their political career. So not taking that into account is foolish as hell. But the Democrats are just so weak and whack. Like, I'm so done with them kids.
Well,
Like,
especially, yeah, what you hear on Twitter, like some of the responses that I've seen. Oh shoot, a man looks like he's kind of almost bald there.
oh damn, he chopped it all off.
Oh, how we doing there, Emmanuel? How we doing, brother?
Give me one
E, what's
second.
up? Just turn it off and then turn it back on.
You all right there, Emmanuel? Here, I'll just go on ahead and tell.
Yeah, I just had to shut something off.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a couple windows open. And
Okay, can you hear me?
So,
Okay, you want me to leave
we're
and
talking about, I guess I'll get you up to speed what we were talking about. We were talking about the Trump acquittal and how we kind of all seen a lot of it coming. And so, what are some of your thoughts? What are some of your thoughts? Just the procedure itself, or just any other thoughts?
Right. Do I am I coming in with the echo still or no?
I don't hear from your end, but I have a delay. When I.
Okay. I hear the delay on your end. So do you honestly want me to come back in and then try again, or?
Yeah, sure. All right. So, some of my thoughts on it. I heard, you saw Ralph Nader out there, and he's talking about, oh, well, if they would have done this differently, and this witness and that witness, and then I saw people's threads where they're talking about, oh, well, you see, the Republicans are all Nazis, and they're taking this whole angle. And the problem with that whole argument is they're not. And they like Chris was saying before, you have to try to protect your seat. And so if you vote against a Republican president, whether you agree with him or not, that constituent in that area, those constituents in that area are going to look at you negatively, and that's going to cost you on your reelection. So those are some of the things that you have to think about. And so another angle that you have to go with is, if they do, if they decide to convict, whether they agree, whether they agree with the Democrats' standpoint, that also leaves a lower and lower standard of what you could do, as far as, filing charges of impeachment. And so if one of them rises to that position of being, in the position of being president one day, what happens if another ally, or sorry, ooh, got a little tongue tied. But what happens if somebody from the opposite side decides that for whatever reason or another, they want you out of office? Maybe it's political, maybe some kind of story pops in the media, which gets manipulated, whatever reason it might be. And they decide, okay, well, we're just going to throw impeachment out there. I can understand them wanting to be a little bit careful from automatically aligning with the Democrats to sink one of their own. And then later on, those same Democrats sink them later on. What are your thoughts?
You're still talking about the Trump acquittal, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, much better, much better.
Okay. As I'm sure Chris and Marcus have alluded to, it's all fake. It's all pro wrestling. It's all kayfabe. I mean, shouldn't be completely surprised that he got acquitted. My personal theory was that if they actually did push forward, Biden would have pardoned him, because you see from previous information, you got Pelosi saying they need a Republican Party. You got Biden saying they need a Republican Party. They're not interested. They're not particularly interested in solving the problems of the Republican Party, because they need the Republican Party. So ultimately, I wasn't really all that surprised. Yep. They know that if they went after him and they came after him, and they have to go after their own. Then they have to go after their own people, because they're guilty of the exact same thing. That's why they let him go. They let him walk.
Correct.
Yeah, Thomas had a comment here that I felt like we should read out. He wrote, I think they have a more legitimate case. I think they had a more legitimate case for impeachment if the Dems went after Trump for violating the Emoluments Clause and human rights violation on the border. But many Dems are guilty of those too. Very, very, very well said. Where did that go? Oh,
numerous people brought that up during the first impeachment trial. Remember, that was brought up during the first impeachment trial. Like, why didn't you go after Trump for that? And then they realized that the reason why they didn't go after Trump for that the first time was because you'd have to bring on Democrats to do it, and Democrats were already behind the 8 ball in the first place, so they weren't particularly interested in going down that road. So it's no wonder that it didn't.
If we're keeping it real, if you listen to anything that happened on January 6th, and y'all know my opinion on that matter, that shit was all theater anyway, at least the part with them running in and taking pictures everywhere. I think that part was fully orchestrated. With that being said, though, I mean, even if you listen to Trump's words, he didn't say go in there and go crazy and destroy shit, run up in there. He said go to the Capitol, fight. If you want to choose to be stupid and take that to mean that he meant for people to run up in the Capitol building, then you're being disingenuous. You know what I'm saying? And again, I'm not a Trump dude either, but I could keep shit 100, as we should. But a lot to do about nothing. Again, right after this, Biden announced they're cutting. Well, he didn't announce it, but here come the Medicare cuts, right? We're supposedly in the middle of a pandemic, and you're wasting time going after Trump, knowing that the Republicans were not going to convict him. 1, 2, you don't want to give out these checks to people who badly need it, and you're just wasting everybody's time. And now you talk about cutting Medicare. Like, again, the Democrats and their fans, they're just weird people. Very, very weird people.
Weird people is a good way to explain it. And I think, honestly, what it is they know that a lot of the Democrats, or at least the people who come out to vote every 4 years, they have a short attention span. And so when things start to get boring again, after this whole impeachment, that was just to give them enough time to be able to make it to go home to vacation. So now they're on vacation. Now that's going to be even a longer period of time before they actually have to start doing something again. Then they're going to find another reason to stall and do whatever, try to margin the checks down even lower and lower. And watch, like we said before, it's going to end up being equal to or almost less than what Trump gave out.
Mm-hmm. Correct. You know, go ahead, E. Sorry.
I was going to say you can already see Democrats saying, what was that famous one? I don't know who the Secretary of Education is. That's such a nice feeling, right? You literally have Democrats literally saying, you know, I can kick back, relax. I don't need to know who they are, even though, you know, the previous Secretary of Education, she got brought up on trial. What happened? Biden's team came in and tried Biden's team came in to cover him, came in to save him. I'm just like, it's all theater at this point. They're not interested in saving anybody. You got Frederick asking what the two parties need to save Black people. They're not interested in saving you. They're not interested in doing any of that. That's not really they don't care about doing legitimately any of that. They don't care about saving you at all. At all. If they cared about Black people like they cared about the rich, man, nobody would be complaining about anything. Nobody would be saying anything about anything because everybody would be more or less okay. But no, we're not the rich. The rich got theirs. They're good. It's everybody else, you know, struggling out here fighting for crumbs. And like Chris was talking about with the check, they're literally arguing over crumbs. And the rich has already got the money on their bag, walking away like, I'm good. This is just theater to me. This is funny to me. This is the equivalent of two hobos fighting over a ham sandwich. Two poor ass hobos fighting over a ham sandwich. When you argue about
and Democratic voters, sorry to cut you off, but the Democratic voters, they look super goofy too. Even again, we're talking about scraps, a little $2,000 check. And, you know, they're the ones going hard on social media like, well, 600 plus 1,400 equals 2,000. What, you can't count? Like, when did he – dude said $2,000. He didn't say, I'm going to give you 1,400 for a total of 2,000, adding in the prior 600 that you received. He didn't say that. He said, yo, you got to get these dudes from Georgia in office, and immediately $2,000 checks will go out. And then the Democrats, and unfortunately, there's a lot of Black people, too, that's on that shit. You know what I'm saying? I have to keep it a buck. It don't make any sense. They out here carrying water for Joe Biden, of all people? Joe Biden? Really? Like, it's crazy to me.
And on that note, that's perfect for us to kind of transition into the Black history kind of portion. Speaking of Joe Biden and Kelly's, you know, very, very nice compliment there. She wrote to us, happy Black History Month to 3 most handsome dudes on YouTube. Thank you so much. So kind. And that's see how Very thinks. See, not even right. We couldn't have that little bit of a compliment for a little bit, Very? You gotta pick on us. Sorry.
Right? We can't live.
But with Joe and what you were saying, how right now they're backing down from the checks, we got to expect that because look at what they did during the primaries. You have a man who is being accused of sexual assault, and you know we were all believe the woman, and you know I can't even remember what was it? Me Too.
Yep.
Me Too.
Yeah, the whole Me Too movement, and everybody, when it was against a Republican or a lesser Democrat who, you know, wasn't running for president, you know, they were all gung-ho and everybody was militant, you know, zero tolerance to almost anything, you know, they didn't even want to hear the man's explanations, excuses, just get him out of there. Then when it flips to a Democratic candidate who could possibly be the president, everybody starts kind of getting a little bit quiet. And then we notice also, especially like Chris was saying, with the Black community, our very own community knows Joe Biden's record and how he, in my opinion, and probably a lot of people's opinion, especially in the Black community, has probably been the one single-handed senator that has done the most damage to the Black community, which is still in office.
And they out here really crying about Donald Trump. Look, say what you want about him. You don't have to like him. That's cool. But he's not been in a position to write policy, to vote on policy. You understand? He was president for 4 years. he didn't craft any policy that was specifically anti-us. I cannot say the same about Joe Biden on any level. And it's frustrating as hell to watch our own people just be sitting here so stuck on MSDNC all day long. Like, it's nuts.
I mean, you got people trying to cancel Joss Whedon, got people trying to cancel Arnie Hammer, and I'm just like, you got all those Democrats trying to do that, and I'm just like, once Joe Biden was given the once Tara Reid was symbolically had her head cut off and stuck on a pike for all the world to see, for Joe Biden.
And that was funny because they erased all their Me Too tweets right as Tara Reid came out and said that Joe Biden assaulted her.
well, in favor of Black History Month, we got to remember the Anita Hill trial, which he did also.
Mm-hmm.
He's even-handed. He'll disrespect Black and white women equally. Oh, women, I forgot Latinas also, because remember, what was it, Lucy Flores, when he was sniffing her hair. So he's equal opportunity. It doesn't matter the race, or it looks like it doesn't really matter the age either.
Right.
From a lot of those photographs that we've seen over time. But back onto like what Anita Hill, the way he allowed those male senators to question her was so disrespectful. And in this day and age, if it was flipped and any man of power decided to sit a woman down in front of Capitol Hill and question her in the way that they did. I mean, with her parents sitting there, elderly parents, they were giving her questions like, do you find him attractive? Are you certain that he actually showed you pornography? I mean, just ridiculous questions. And then, I mean, I'm trying to be kind of clean and not go into some of the more
explicit
comments, explicit stuff, because there was a lot of explicit comments and questions which were allowed to go on, and he was completely in charge of that. And then to watch the Black women, which I grew up with being, the generation above me, my parents, their family, their friends, to turn around now, watching Joe Biden do that, being at, late teens or 20s, old enough to understand what's going on, and watching him disrespect not only her, but Black women as a whole, and for them to turn around and just ignore it. It's water under the bridge, because this man Trump, everybody says, is so bad for what he's done in a couple of years. What Joe Biden has done, I mean, I honestly can't think of a policy that has not been negative to the Black community that Joe Biden's name is not on. Every single one. You want to look up private prisons. You want to look up 3 strikes.
Wars.
All of this stuff, all the different wars that are going on. You look at basically slavery that's going on in Libya. You look at just all of the different problems which have led to the mass refugees into Europe, and all the problems they're having over there, which led to more anti-Semitism. I mean, not anti-Semitism, but racism and hatred towards people from the African nations, more Islamophobia, all of those things like that, all because of what our elected officials are doing here, and they're never held to account. I mean, it's kind of disappointing and sad for me to understand that my people are the ones who are repeatedly keeping some of our biggest enemies over the top of them, keeping our biggest enemy right in front of us.
And they're using Black women they're primarily using Black women to do this. I watch it and it's so annoying, right? Every time I turn on the TV or I see a news clip, there's some Black woman on there talking like she's like, you can't approach them, you can't say anything because her voice is the be all end all of all things that politics. And it's just so dumb. But I get why they want them to lead, because they're not talking about moving away from the Democratic Party. They're saying, plant your flag, let's stay here and make it better. That, again, that's such a colossal waste of time. Now we still,
Speaking of the black women thing, you reminded me of something which I want to hear both your opinions on, but I'll give it to you first, Chris, since you brought it up. On the View, excuse me, on the View, what's her name? Sunny Hostin was giving Van Jones like a pretty rough time, and
I
one
saw a
of the
piece of that.
questions she asked him was basically like almost insinuating that he was a traitor to the whole black race or something like that. And I'm thinking, since when did Sunny Hostin become the speaker for all black people? She sure the hell don't speak for me.
Correct.
Now, do I rock with Van Jones and do I agree with him, what he was trying to do with Trump or any of that? No. I think he is an opportunist and he will try to hitch his wagon onto wherever he think he can get an extra payday. So I don't even think it's really about a Trump or whatever. But because he does that, how is he any different than what most of y'all are doing? They're on TV encouraging people to trust Joe Biden's gonna just fix everything. And now that he's in office, we can all just get back to normal and relax. Now I'm seeing all these numbers. Now everybody was concerned so much, and I'll try to be a little bit careful on this about the pandemic. Everybody was super concerned about it before the election. Now I'm seeing stories about New York City and all these places getting ready to start concerts and sporting events and all this stuff right back up. Now, you're telling me that this is something that we need to be terrified of and we need to take all these precautions. And then you turn around and you're giving, I'm just saying it's giving me a conflicting message. So, I mean, can one of you brothers help me out and explain this to me?
Well, I'll tell you, I couldn't explain it to you, Marcus. It confuses the crap out of me. I mean, they're already talking about, mixing vaccines. That doesn't work. I know what I'm doing. They're already talking about mixing vaccines. They're already talking about a worldwide, vaccination plan. They're talking about reopening schools when we all clearly know, objectively, that schools are, that schools are pretty much ground zero for germ carriers. You got pundits on TV saying, it's stressing kids being at home all the time stresses the parents out. And I'm like, no, they're stressed out because they don't have any money and they don't know how they're going to take care of the kid and feed him and keep his house or whatever. So the kid feels that. So, and then even on here, I have to be careful about exactly what I say in regards to the pandemic and the virus, because if I say the wrong thing, the episode could get pulled. So then there's the deal of censorship. So, seems like there's a lot of money there. There's just a lot of money there, and
in fact, you know what? That reminds me of something. I was just because in doing some of my research and then of course some of my studies, sometimes you just have to study very, very simple, basic things to understand more complex stories. And one of those things I was studying, bear with me for a minute, audience. Can you look up the word, Chris, the word citizen? Just the definition of citizen. And we're going to put the definition of citizen up real quick, and we're going to read the definition of citizen. And I want to ask everybody out there listening, are you a citizen by this definition? And I will leave it up to everyone else, but I just want to hear your how you feel about this definition as I started to read it. You got it, Chris?
No, go ahead, because you guys were like chopping up pretty bad. So say that last part. Ask the question again.
Define citizen. Bring up the definition of citizen. That's what Marcus said.
Yes, of citizen. and we're going to read the definition of citizen.
Oh, for me
Because
personally, it's just, um, somebody who should benefit from the society in which they live in, right? Whether
yeah,
it be clean water,
should.
clean air, things of that nature. I mean, I don't think, society should just give everybody a whole bunch of money that, whatever. But I mean, you should have access to services, whether it be good hospitals, whether it be good schools, things of that nature. So to me, that's my definition of it.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna give the exact definition so we can see if this fits. Here's the definition in the Merriam online Webster dictionary. Definition of a citizen. Uh, Explanation number one: an inhabitant of a city or town, especially one entitled to the rights and privileges of a free man. Now, when I think of the rights and privileges of a free man, that would also include freedom of speech. Now, some could say, well, you're on a platform which is, a private platform. Well, I would also argue back that because of the monopolization of this private platform, it is very, very difficult to be able to speak in any other forum to a mass audience of people. Therefore, they have moved themselves more into a public utility. And by being a public, once you're into that category, getting into a public utility, then you should be adhering to freedom of speech rights. We'll go into this next definition, the second one. Second one, a member of state. B, a native or naturalized person who owes allegiance to a government and is entitled to protection from it. Protection. You're entitled to protection from it as a citizen. Because sometimes I think, we just have to sometimes just go back and, go back to the basics, read some things a little bit more simply, a little slower, and think about it. Because I definitely don't feel very protected, especially when I know the statistic that every 28 hours, a black or brown man is shot down by the cops unarmed every 28 hours. So I don't feel very protected, especially when I see red and blue lights behind me. Let's go into number 3. A civilian as distinguished from a specialized servant of the state. So that's talking about soldiers. Now, under those definitions, those multiple explanations, how many of you all feel that you have the true and free rights of a citizen here in the United States?
We know we don't. Yeah, we don't. We don't at all. And speaking of military, what is it? What they just announced today? That they're going to continue to provide support to Saudi Arabia for their genocide efforts in Yemen. So again, Biden is trash. I mean, they all are, but it's so clear and it's so fast. I mean, it's not even been a month yet. And even when it comes to even Afghanistan, look, Trump tried to pull a few troops out. Obviously, he wasn't pulling them all out, but he tried to pull a few out. And Biden administration now is like, nah, we're not even going to do that much.
I see Mike's in the building. Hey, Mike.
Mike, what's up?
What's up, Mike?
One of the things also that I was thinking about as far as it being Black history, now that Biden is in and everybody has done all this talk about ACAB and about police funding and all that, I see that here in LA that they're approving an extra like 250 million in overtime to the police out here. Now, you already know where they're going to be at. And this is all coming from Biden cracking down on our community. Now, I know a lot of people want to talk about, hey, well, you know, George Washington Carver and the Peanuts, and they want to talk about Ralph Bunche, or let's talk about Martin Luther King, and we could talk about all of those men and their contributions. But another part of Black history that we don't focus on is people living today are still part of that story, you know. And so we got to think about the history that's being made at the very moments while we're speaking. We never know what instant or what moment that we're actually in the middle of, because if you look back in history, nobody ever saw the moments and how they were building. You look at all the great revolutions throughout history, the people who were on the ground and involved in it, some people kind of got a feel and could see some things moving, but the masses never saw it coming. And that's the reason why a lot of times it goes all over the place. And like Science was talking about earlier, the guillotines come out and all those other things, because when it takes off like that, there's no way of controlling it. There's no organization, there's no leader, because if there's no person which everybody respects across the board, nobody's going to calm down, listen to them, and have cooler heads. Every man or woman is going to do as thou will. And in chaos or anarchy, that can be a very dangerous thing. Now, unfortunately, that's how it goes most of the times, and I hope that it doesn't lead to that. But we do see, whether it's here or whether other places, we see it going on in other places throughout the world. I mean, look at what's going on with Africa. I mean, it's a video which I'm working on that I'm going to show everybody, where I think he's from Great Britain, and he's literally talking about how we have to keep certain nations down. If we don't keep them down, then our prices don't stay as low in the so-called first world nations. So it's kind of known and agreed that certain nations like the United States, Great Britain, Spain, France, Italy, all of these nations, Germany, Russia, all together are colluding to keep parts of Africa broke and poor and corrupt. And it's not just, oh, well, these Africans just can't figure it out, and they're just all savages which need, you know, the white man to come and teach them how to be civilized. That's not what's going on here. You gotta, if we start looking deeper back in history, one thing we gotta understand is the people who put them into poverty are the people who are pretending to save them now. They're the ones who came in, colonized, raped, robbed, murdered, enslaved. I mean, Chris not that long ago was talking about the what was it, Leopold III and the genocide which he did in the
Nobody
Congo.
knows who I realize that nobody knows who he is. Nobody. Barely anybody knows.
Nobody knows. And this
because we always have to talk about the Holocaust and World War II and Hitler. You know, that's it.
in which let's say that, you know, the worst of the worst things about the Holocaust are 100%. And you know what? It's even worse than what we've heard. Let's say it's 7 million people who died during the Holocaust. Well, during that Leopold genocide, that was over 12 million people. And it's not even mentioned or heard of. There's things which we don't talk about in which I feel like, why in school aren't young Black kids taught about Nat Turner and his revolt? Why aren't we taught about the Haitian revolt? Why aren't we taught about these things?
Because, you know, the Haitian revolt was super successful, and they don't want anybody thinking that you can actually challenge those in power and actually win. You know, they would have you think that, yeah, you can challenge power, but inevitably you're going to always fail in the long run, such as Nat Turner did. But yeah, the Haitian Revolution is something that should always be discussed in school, but it's never talked about in school. Matter of fact, I mean, thankfully I had parents who talked about this kind of stuff, but you know, I didn't learn about it until I was done with school. I was completely out of school. I'm an adult, like reading about this stuff, like, damn, You think they would have told us this, but can anything nothing can get past the Holocaust and Germany, 1930s. That seems to be like the center of history for a lot of the people, especially even those on the left too.
Well, here's another thing that I like to throw in there also. When we think about the Native Americans here, especially in this part of North America, and I honestly include all of the Americas, kind of as a whole, because of course they broke into their own different tribes and different customs over the centuries. But before encountering the white man, for the most part, they were all kind of similar tribes, different shades of black and brown. And so some of the people who were brought over in the so-called thought to be brought over in the transatlantic slave trade, some of those people were actually natives actually here. and what's often not correctly taught in schools is not all of the people who came in over in the transatlantic slave trade were, they weren't the only black slaves that were over here. Some of these black slaves were already indigenous black slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not factored in or mentioned. And then also, it's not talked about how certain kingdoms in Africa, when their kings or princes were accidentally sold into slavery, how they were returned. That's not talked about. That only certain people were rounded up to be enslaved. Certain particular tribes were targeted. Now, who were they targeted by? First off, it started with the Portuguese. The Portuguese started off a lot of this. But at the same time, there was a lesser known slave trade that was going on to a lot of those earlier North Africans. And when I'm saying North Africa, I'm talking from east to the area of the Levant, all the way over to West Africa. And in that Central Africa, Congo region. These people were also sold by Arab traders into what is called the Silk Road slave trade, which led all the way over into Tibet and places like that, which eventually led all the way into China, which led into some of those slaves actually being the same slaves which built the literal Great Wall of China. Then you have those people who are already working this smaller slave trade. Well, not really small, but it's small in comparison when you factor in all of the nations of Europe were all Confederate in the slave trade back and forth to America and all of these other nations. Literally, Great Britain, England, Ireland, Denmark, Germany, Russia, every single Italy, France, you can just keep going. Greece, every single one of these nations were involved in some kind of way, whether it was the nation which put up the money, the nation which was building the ships, the nation which started out manning the ships, the nation which was receiving the slaves on the other side, the people who were involved in capturing the slaves, the people that were involved in executing the slaves or justice. There was a completely organized system which was sanctioned literally by the Roman Catholic Church. And there are actually what do they call them, papal bulls, which you can look up, where they deem all of these different things which were perfectly fine to round up these slaves. Now, we see it a lot of times in movies and don't even realize it. When they talk about the Crusades was all kind of, it merged all into this period, because that's when the Roman Catholic Church let these people at will do whatever they felt like doing. And they say, you know what, if you do it, you're doing it for the church, bring back wealth, enslave, whatever you feel like doing, do it. And it's granted to you, you're protected by the church. And that, in my opinion, is the beginning of white supremacy. So
Look,
sorry, I got on
some
my
of the
soapbox a little bit, but that's a little bit of my spiel on some of the Black history that we don't talk about in schools.
You know, some of the comments too, referring. I think Signs had mentioned Los Angeles's police budget, and then Thomas is mentioning New York's police budget.
Or was it that?
One,
See,
oh, there it is. Billions of dollars for the police here. Like, you know, it's crazy to me.
I saw the chart. What's that one? New York's is bigger than I think the military budget of. Oh God, it's some small country, Uganda or something like. Not Uganda. It's another one. But you know, people were.
Uganda's not small.
I know that's not right. I'm like, no. I can't remember what country. I can't remember what the chart is, but they were basically saying, you know, like specific cities' police budgets are more than some whole country's military budget.
Mm-hmm.
It is not just. It is not just North Korea we're talking about. It's literally a lot. And then someone even put various countries' total military budgets. They, you know, I think it was like maybe half a dozen. You know, if you combine them all together, still don't even make up what America spends in total on the military. So,
yeah, I put this up. I wanted to respond. Very input. I think it's traumatizing to teach young children about slavery. And she said before the previous comment, one reason schools teach young Black children about slavery is to make them feel inferior from a young age, to also cause racial divide among children. Well, yes and no. They do it because they have to tell some part of it. The thing is, it's what are they telling you and what are they not telling you? That's the thing. Every single body in the United States, except for probably 3 groups of people, as a majority of population, can trace back their ancestors, previously the 1400s. Blacks, Hispanics, and Latinos are the only people who cannot trace back their roots before that time period. And the schools are perfectly fine with teaching you, hey, you were Mayans and the Incas. But what was the beginning of their society? Did they come from somewhere else? Did they always live there? There's archaeology which shows, all kinds of things, but why aren't those things ever brought up? Why aren't they brought to the table? And that's some of the things. That's why I think that they're careful how they talk about certain things. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, what Varian said was true as far as, teaching people to feel inferior, because they only talk about slavery. The history doesn't go on prior to that. It's just like, hey, you got here on a boat. Your people were beat. You picked cotton. You have Reconstruction. They fought a civil war over you guys. And yeah, that's it. It's never anything more than, it's never taught in a way to like make you feel as if you can overcome these things. Like it's always it's always taught to make you feel inferior and low and mess up your self-esteem. I mean, that's just how I see it, because you could tell a whole bunch of other stories too.
Well, here's something I wanted to add to. You brought up Civil War. When I was in school, I never, ever, ever, ever once heard that Russia had anything to do with the Civil War. Now, Russia, what was it? King Nicholas II actually sent the Russian royal fleet over here, and they actually assisted the North in helping with slavery. Now, do we ever hear any of that? Why? Why don't we hear anything ever about how Russia was actually a lot more involved in world history and events, and a lot of people at the top or during those time periods knew about it, but for some reason it's not mentioned. And I believe a strong reason why is because of the Roman Catholic Church. If you start looking at their churches over there in Russia and you start listening to Russian historians, you get a different message of a lot of the Bronze Age and other periods of history, which we say Western Europe doesn't want to talk about or say it's completely lost or we can't verify anything. But for some reason in Eastern Europe, they have no problem verifying a lot of things. And so for me, it started to make sense to me in a way, or maybe I'm just paranoid, that the reason they've been demonizing these people goes back more than, war. It goes back more than the 80s and, the Cold War. It goes back before World War II or World War I or any of these wars. This is something which goes back further than we've even realized. It goes back, War of 1812 goes back, Civil War, then War of 1812. And even before that, this isn't even about socialism and communism or all that stuff, which is made up to be. This is literally, in my opinion, from some of the research I've seen, the Russians decided to get involved in certain people trying to make money in this new world. And that is why they have always been an enemy to the powerful elite in the United States and in the Western world. Now, they'll come up with whatever different reasonings to attack a certain people. But in my opinion, it's all coming from that early beef, which, messed up a whole lot of their plans early on. What are your thoughts, Emmanuel?
My thoughts about what Variant said, them trying to use slavery to keep people down. I think there's little variants. I think there's little variants of that. Of course, like, we romanticize the South, right? We romanticize slavery down here. Okay. We do. They still use plantations as they still use slave plantations as backdrops for weddings, stuff like that. For me, and I'm grateful that I was able to see it, although I feel bad I saw it as an adult. I'm grateful that I hear stories about, like, black kids in Alabama, being sent to a cotton field and being told to pick cotton. And the parent, it's supposed to be phrased as a funny story, but, if you heard it, if a parent heard that, they'd be horrified if they knew that, their black kid, they signed off and the black kid went with a whole bunch of his other little black kids to a cotton field, and the cotton company gave them like little blue bags of little blue cotton bags and said, "Go out and pick some cotton. It'll be fun in the hot sun, right? Go out and pick some cotton. It'll be fun." And if one of them hadn't stuck a big ball of it in his pocket, the mother would have never found it. Little black kid's mother would have never found it and gotten mad about it because she signed off on it. So it's the normalization that really gets to me about it. If you look at Germany, they don't glorify any of it. They don't maintain any of those buildings. They just maintain it for historical purposes. Like, this happened. It's horrible. You need to know that it was horrible so that this doesn't happen again. We never do that about slavery. We never do that because there's just so much horror in it that if you sat there and you told everybody literally like every single thing, people would be disgusted, not even with what's happening now, but the connotations in the present day problems that we have right now in the present moment because of what happened in slavery and because we don't acknowledge that horror. Still there's just, so that's my take on it. Really, it's just, tell them, don't tell them. You'll never see an adult sit a bunch of 7-year-olds down and explain exactly how the indigenous people got indigenous genocide or black slavery and explain it in excruciating detail. They won't do that. That's
I wanted to share this comment that Thomas put in here. And say, you guys ever hear From Nothing or Home Team History? They have good takes and history of Africa based on peer-reviewed history that most have never heard of. Good channels. I haven't heard of From Nothing, but I've watched a lot of home team history and used a lot of his work for research. So I definitely recommend him. I'll have to check out the other channel, but I'm pretty sure it's good also. But definitely home team. He does some really good research. Um, I have some I have some, I guess different ways I see some of his conclusions, because I'm looking through a different lens, but definitely very, very powerful work. Let's see, what else did we see? Oh, Variant said they don't want black children to believe they can be successful outside of being an athlete or entertainer. Exactly. That's the reason why that's the only thing you hear about. That's what you see about. I mean, even when we talk in history, yes, it's cool to talk about Jackie Robinson and Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington and all of these, people like that, Charlie Parker. But why don't we ever hear about the black politicians during the Reconstruction period?
Hmm.
We never hear about those stories. We never hear about the roaring jazz age in Harlem and how they had their own pharmacies and their own bakeries and all of these, thriving communities, which not only in New York, but you had in like Seattle, Washington, which you had in Tulsa, which you had in parts of Jacksonville, Florida, which you had in all over, Kansas City, Chicago. You had bustling, up and coming cities for descendants of freed slaves, and that's never talked about. Now, granted, a lot of them were destroyed or gentrification took them away and various other things, but the fact that it's not even talked about to show young black kids that, hey, you guys were doing this and doing that. No, let's only talk about Fetty Wap and Lil Wayne, and let's talk about what Beyonce and Jay-Z and whatever stupid shit Kanye is going to do today. Let's only focus on that, and then we'll tell them Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, but only focus on the speeches that we want, because to be honest, Malcolm X kind of got a little soft at the end. And a lot of people don't want to explain about or bring up how Martin Luther King got a lot more militant towards the end. His last speech was titled "Why America is Going to Hell." So, I like for you all who are not familiar with that to go look into it, because if you understand like the speech on the mountaintop and you start hearing things about you look into his trip to Libya. I mean, not Libya, but Lebanon. He had a trip over to Lebanon, and if you all hear some of the details and some of the things that were going on with that visit, it's just I'll leave it there. It can even get me in the hot water just starting to talk about it. So I'll just say look into Martin Luther King, Lebanon, and then look at his, what was it, mountain Sermon on the Mountaintop. Look up those speeches and just read it for yourself and see what you think he's talking about and why he was killed the very next day.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I'll tell you about it, Chris, later off camera, but
Well,
I'm not going to say it on camera.
there was a theory. There was a theory that supposedly why their two viewpoints shifted was because they were talking to each other, and one was actually able to, that supposedly they were going to team up. And then, of course, if they combine their forces and their brilliance and their intelligence together, they would have been an incredibly dangerous force. And the United States said, "No, we're not." The powers that be said, "No, we're not good. We're not good with that." So, but I mean, I didn't even know that. Go ahead.
Oh, you didn't know? You didn't know what?
No, I said I didn't know that. I didn't know of that theory until what? Like, I think I was like,
Well,
I
I
think
guess
19.
some of this stuff I will go into next week because next week we will officially be on Rockfin. So if they decide to take down the content on YouTube, hop over and catch it on Rockfin. But yes, we will officially be on Rockfin next week. I will try to get on early, so if we are running a little late, bear with us. Be trying to get that figured out so we're broadcasting on all the different platforms on all my different social medias, and hopefully these two are tweeting it out. Better be. But let's see. Thomas said Black Americans were cut off from their roots and heritage, and later only tough. Only through their history began with slavery and slavery revolts. This is why some blacks may be confused about our identity and history. Well, you got to ask yourself. They literally have museums all over the place that have records of who slave owners were, where slaves came from, descriptions of the slaves, their names, things like that, languages which they spoke. You got to ask yourself why they don't talk about any of this stuff. Why is it so taboo to talk about what nations these people might have come from? Now, you'll let them guess and think and say, well, maybe I'm an Egyptian, or maybe I'm Ethiopian, or maybe I'm this, or maybe I'm that. But there are plenty of people out there. I've read multiple books with very, very concrete theories showing archaeology, showing DNA, and things to give a very, 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 very strong indication of who these people are and who we are. But there are powers that be that if certain things are revealed, it can be threatening to certain people. So, good news for some people is not good news for everybody. So you always have to be careful with how they release certain information, because a lot of this stuff I've kind of figured out where a lot of the so-called African Americans come from, and I talk about it on my show, Hebrew Apologetics. So check it out over there, and we'll go into a little bit more. But you have any comments, Chris?
Yeah, no, I was just laughing to myself a little bit, thinking like I'm not going to say anything that's going to get our show taken down like 2 weeks ago. But since I did want to touch on COVID, obviously,
Chris,
here we are. Here we are. Numbers are going down. Did you guys see that Biden threatened DeSantis here in Florida and basically threatened to cut off travel to and from Florida over the coronavirus because he feels that DeSantis is not, shutting down the state or having a double mask mandate or anything like that. I just would like to tell the feds, Joe Biden, whoever's listening, mind your business. We're okay down here. Thank you very much.
Man, it's a good thing I don't go anywhere anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that way I don't even have to worry about putting the damn thing on or fighting with anybody about it. Most of the time I'm at home. So
They're already talking about vaccination passports, so that's already, we all had predicted that a while ago. They're already talking about those. So maybe
they're pushing that hard out of England too. Here's another question, right? They were mad at Trump at the start of this last year, right? Saying that he didn't do enough. They keep telling us that we have this new variant strain coming out of England. Yeah, we have not shut down travel to England. So is this real or is it not? You know what I'm saying? Trump banned travel from China immediately.
Right. There's a
South Africa
variant too.
Because the one in South Africa they say is highly contagious. And the LA variant is already, sorry to use your name variant, but it's already went worldwide.
Correct. So I just found it a little disingenuous that, they spent all last year blaming Trump for all of the deaths, and now you're telling us that this thing mutated, and we know where it's coming from, and we're not restricting travel. So again, to me, like I said, it's more bullshit. But don't worry, it's gonna go away. It's gonna decline soon enough.
Mm. Varian had a comment there, which I was like, oh, I can't resist that comment. So, why do Asian, Black, Mexican Americans need to know white history? I will give you a good answer. The reason why you need to know it, and I'm not saying know it to go after and attack these people for their ancestors, but you need to know it because then you can start understanding how the power players are in this world. If you understand who did what and when and where and what was going on, you can understand when people talk about, oh, well, this was whitewashed and that was whitewashed. And why you hear stories of Henry VIII destroying a whole lot of, frescoes and artwork, you start understanding some of these things. You start understanding why in history all of a sudden when the Renaissance period happened, the Roman Empire went like gangbusters and start spreading all over and taking over and colonizing and conquering and stealing gold and everything. Why all of a sudden did they automatically, once they got in power, act completely different than they were acting before? I mean, it was almost like, okay, it was a little bit of cold, and then it came back like, severe bronchitis. I mean, how they came back in the Renaissance period was, it wasn't just about dominating nations and conquering different nations and power and control. It was about dominating certain particular nations. And that's why I always say that's when white supremacy pretty much started in the world. From that point on, they've had all control over whatever images are put out, publications, our media. And so if we've been fed a diet of what white supremacists, even if it's not something that's explicitly white supremacist, for instance, if you always make Santa Claus or always make all the superheroes white or things like that, it's subconsciously putting an image in your head that these people, for some reason, there's something about them that makes them superior. And because your image is never one of those people as the hero, then you're the sidekick at best, or you're inferior. And that's not even recognized how that's pushed through. And that goes on to another point that me and Chris were talking about. This has been in the back of my mind for a while. And I thank my viewers and people who, even if you just stop in for a moment, I thank them for joining us. A lot of times, three black males on a platform don't get very much attention. It don't get an audience that will consistently listen to us. A lot of times what we find is even in the lefty community, which says that, oh, we're all about equality and we want to hear everybody's voice, even when it comes to black issues and subjects, those so-called equality black lefty, I mean, not black lefties, but equality lefties who are all about Black Lives Matter and we want to hear the voice of the downtrodden black and brown community, don't tune in and listen to black and brown commentators on any of the stuff or content creators. I mean, think of it. I can only think of, well, I know many more, but the most that most people would know of would be Nico House, Tim Black, Ben Dixon, and maybe what is that? Progressive Soapbox. Maybe you might know Unapologetic, or what is it? The MMA Socialists. But outside of them and maybe me, nobody else can name hardly anybody. Or even once you drop off from Nico, those top four, any of the rest of these other platforms, they don't get the same kind of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And is it that, oh, well, all the black voices, are they not as intelligent, as our white counterparts or some of our other brown counterparts? Is that the issue?
Give me a pillow.
Or is it possibly because we have a society which is being conditioning us to look to certain people and listen to them, or have more trust in certain people, and to subconsciously have more distrust in other people and question? I find that in the lefty circle, I have more people that try to question my intelligence, not knowing that I'm former military. I've lived all over the world, lived in multiple countries, um, speak a little bit of a handful of languages. Um, Went to college for 5 years, studying history and political science, and I have a wealth of knowledge on a whole bunch of issues, directly hands-on. Some of it classified and top secret information and intel from my military time. And then I'll have some silly leftist, some kid who's probably 24, 25 years old, just moved out from his parents, finished college, and assume that I'm just some kind of idiot who's just pulling crap out of my ass, that I don't research or study anything. And then they listen to some of these other knuckleheads who would just grab a clip offline, a popular clip, talk about it for about 2 minutes, put that out, and then that gets a whole bunch of retweets. I mean, at some point, got to start looking at some of the people around us and say, hey, do you have some internal prejudices that, especially during Black History Month, that you might need to look into yourself? I don't know. Maybe that might be a first start in helping with some of the problems that we have. If more people of a lighter hue could start looking at some of their own internal prejudices. I mean, I call it Diet Coke racism. It's not that hardcore punch like, taking a E and J in the morning or something like that, or taking a straight Crown to the dome, but it's that Diet Coke. It's just a little bit of racist. It's that person who never says racist comments, but they like, hey, Cynthia, can I touch your hair? That's what I mean. That's Diet Coke racism. You feel like you're cool with Black people and you're everything's fine, but you don't realize how you're being patronizing in different ways. You're being disrespectful. You're being condescending. And a lot of times you're underestimating people. You got to remember, we've had a whole system of oppression fighting against us for centuries with not very much help. And so to assume that, yeah, you guys have to teach us stuff. Like I remember listening to this one white guy the other day said, oh, I bet if I told most of my Black friends that the KKK is a Christian organization, they would be shocked. No, dumbass. No, we wouldn't be shocked. We know that shit. I mean, the stuff that just white people assume that we don't know. I mean, I guess maybe I'm answering my own question why some of us don't have a ton of viewers, but I mean, people just need to check themselves a little bit more. What are your thoughts, fellas? I blab a lot. I know you'll let me go on all night long.
Go ahead, E.
I was just going to say people need to. I was going to say people understand white history simply because it ingratiates of our lives, like even with what happened on January the 6th. Even the knowledge of that had been a bunch of black and brown, right, that stormed that building. What would America have done? They would have been all over every community, every organization. They would have spied on every. Wouldn't have crap about civil liberties, any of that. They would have called, the news called it black and brown extremism up in, on the line, and they need to take it out, and every a bunch of white people did it. A bunch of prominent military, police, doctor, lawyers, neat white people. They give it this blanket extremism, and they say, you know what, we'll look into it for like a day, just to ease your peace of mind and go whatever we were doing. So you have to know is to know is not only their language, but to be aware that the skin is almost universal. Is to be aware of the fact that they to be aware of the fact that go in the world. If you're white, you're probably going to get justice and be okay. It shocked me how many people aren't aware of that fact. Like, for the most part, in the majority, if you die on the street or something like that, you will be avenged. Someone will carry out something in your if that happens to a white person, it'll be carried out in your name. It's going to happen. So I context is always in. People have a real hard time connecting present. So it's just something. It's just something. We've got to consciously work toward. And I know we're a small group, and barely anybody listens to anything that we. I feel like we don't have viewers, but being aware and paying attention, focusing on what's going on. You're more cognizant of what goes on. With the news and the politics and the media, so you can sift through the bullshit easier than I support Kanye, or I support what Ice Cube was doing with Trump or whatever, and just try to look just a little bit deeper what's going on, or maybe just not even worry about it at all because it's just superfluous at best anyway. So that's honestly my take on it.
Yeah, I love Veritas.
You see it in
comment up because he left I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Right, based off of the icon, I have no idea.
But great comment. I'll read it out. It says, "We see it in countries surrounded by white people." There's a Manuel, can you do it quick?
Yeah.
All right. It says, "We see it in countries founded by white people, and there's nothing wrong with it." And that's going back to the comment that Thomas made about Eurocentrism, and that also is fed deeply into our movies. And a lot of people don't think about how influential that those images are, from TV and from movies. I wanted to follow that up with the next comment. I have considered how my life could be if my ancestors were taken as slaves to be second-class citizens in another country, and how difficult that could be to have to live in a society made for, get this, hold on, made for people of another culture. It would be difficult, but I would then want to change their culture and country to accommodate me when they had the system that worked for me. No. Well, this is how I see it. How it is these people, the only thing you can do is just deal and live within it. Because if you look back to Reconstruction period, or you go back to the Civil War, some people decided, okay, well, I'll pick this side and I'll try to fight for the North and help. That didn't work out for them. They decided Reconstruction period. Okay, well, we'll get into elected office. Well, you saw what happened after that. You saw a sharp rise in the Klan and everything else. Okay, you go a little bit further. You have Marcus Garvey, and he's like, hey, well, why don't I just get a ship together, and all the black people want to leave, we can just go to Africa and we can just leave. Well, Coast Guard comes out, turns his ass around, says, no, that's not happening, boots him out of the country. All right, then you see the Civil Rights era. all of the civil rights leaders start rising up and start asking for equality. What happens? They start getting killed, assassinated, thrown in prison. Then what happens? Then they get a little bit more militant and say, no, we're going to demand it. Then what happens? They get killed, they get thrown in jail, and the next thing you know, drugs and everything are exposed to our community, liquor stores everywhere. You start having all of these things go on. And so, what do? When you're being attacked from every angle. And then people say, whoa, you can go back to Africa, or for one, where would you go in Africa? Most of us have no clue. And even if we did, we couldn't be able to trace an actual relative. So we can't go back to Africa, so we're kind of stuck here. And then the fact of our ancestors, all of the free labor we put into this country, and then we just have to just kind of take it on the chin again and not get anything out of it and just leave and start from scratch in another nation. And then what's to say in that nation we're going to be fine because the United States and Europe basically keeps Africa down along with Latin America and Asia. So what would be the benefit, or how would we even get out of this basic captivity, even going back to our supposed home nations? I mean, there's no real way out of that box. I'm sorry to kind of come across a little bit, pessimistic, but I mean, think about Native Americans who are living in North Dakota, and they have to see the people who slaughtered, 100 million of their ancestors and shipped them away on slave ships all over the different, nations and countries and whatever. Then they got to see their faces up there, which patriotic white people run up and they get all emotional staring at George Washington and all these people who put so much trauma and brutality on the people whose land was before them. I mean, how would you think that would make you feel? I mean, the fact that there hasn't either been some kind of revolution with all of the people organizing and going at the government, or being completely wiped out, is amazing in my understanding. How people would just say, you know what, there's nothing we can do. We're screwed no matter what we do. So we're just kind of stuck, and we got to deal with whatever's dealt out to us. Let's see. And what else? Get back down. Let's see. Mike says, I think minorities have to take control of their educational system and teach their people to build their own economies and teach their own history based on peer review. We can't depend on whites. That is true, but you got to remember, how are schools funded? Schools are funded by property tax. Schools are also guided by the curriculum of whatever the state decides on. For instance, I grew up and went to school in the state of Kansas. Kansas is a predominantly white state. Now, though the area I grew up in had a pretty sizable minority area in Kansas City, once you get outside of my county of Wyandotte County and Jackson County on the Missouri side, the rest of the state is pretty much white. So whatever we vote on gets overruled by the rest of the state. So it's hard for blacks to have any kind of power in taking control over the education system when it's always going to be overruled on a state or federal level. Another thing is, what's decided curriculum? If teacher decides, you know what, hey, I want to start teaching about the Tuskegee experiments, well, then you're going to have some organization that's going to decide, no, you can't teach this. And so that's another thing. We're not allowed to decide what we want to teach. We're still relegated by basically, for lack of a better term, white overseers. So I don't really see how we could even just take over the education. And then say we want to educate online. What do we have happening online? censorship. So they decide what they want taught, and they decide what they don't want taught. Let's see, what else do we got here? Let's see, Mike said, oh, sorry, double tapped. Says, I mean, some whites want to help and do it all that, but we can't reach liberation until we handle our own business. Well, and that's what I always argue back to. And some of the points I hearken to when I start talking about, what did I say we were going to call him, Chris? Hydra. When I start talking about Hydra. Well, the people of Hydra, whatever their nationality may be, I'm not blaming what these people at the top of Hydra has done and connecting them to the 99% of the rest of the group of people that they come from. And what those people at the top of Hydra like to do is they like to spread the complaint out and say, no, you're attacking us all as a people. That way they can get their less clever or people or more gullible people in their sect to go back to the victim mentality and not pay attention that they're being used as a human shield to hide from the dirt that they're doing. But, that's the reason why you see certain people getting in trouble every 5 minutes if they say even one little comment that pisses off their overseers. Chris, you got any comments, brother?
No, I'm just here listening. Obviously I agree. I'm reading in the comment section, I agree with, there's nuance to everything, right? There's not everything I agree with totally, and there's not everything I disagree with totally. There's nuance, and, we have to take into account the times we live in. We can't just look at things through the lens of back when. We do exist now, so we have to take that into account. But, other than that, we're coming up on an hour and a half, so it's like 2 a.m. here. Am I the only one still talking?
No.
Oh.
Take his I was reading the one where they were like, that's feasible with tribes, but like with blacks and other people, they have very little land. I agree with that. Ironically enough, I had a black teacher who taught me, stuff like Marcus Garvey and the real atrocities of slavery and stuff like that. He didn't have to. I think that was probably because he wasn't born here. He was born in the Caribbean. In fact, I think, and I should remember this. I think 80. So that's probably why he was more. I'm going to call him more about that people making sure that not even just black people, but just like one in class was like aware of like this level of his know anything about. So at the end of the day, maybe that's just a reflection on, maybe that's just on my generation or past generations. I just, the majority seem to be really more just listening to a celebrity spout off. They have no idea what they're talking about, or listening to the government, no idea what they're talking about, listening to a teacher, and they have no idea what they're talking about, instead of like, going to a library or a city, or you can even go on the internet to what the lower half of the people that markets out and get yourself informed. It's not that hard to learn what's going on. It takes more time. It takes more effort, and just even when we didn't have anything, Black people are always able to learn something. So do I wish it was easier? Sometimes I see how much ignorance can spread when we are not our history, or we're not aware of what's going on. Sure, but that core foundation of just asking of antagonist, asking the wrong, the question that pisses off, or asking a question that gets people upset, or even so far as to pick, like getting our episode. I'm proud of that I'm proud of that. Stiz.
Yeah, I just
We got pulled for.
Because I wanted to find this quote. All right, yeah, I found it. Because it does touch on what you were saying, Emmanuel. This is by Alvin Toffler. He's an author and I guess inspirational speaker. He said the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's part of the problem. So many people have learned certain things that are incorrect and are unwilling to let that go, even when there's information which contradicts their understanding. And like it said, those are going to be the illiterate. Most of us can read and write in this new 21st century, but the problem is going to be the people, when he's saying that can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. Those are going to be the people who are not able to think clearly, be able to have an open-minded thought, take in information, and be able to reassess and go with that, and not let your pride stand in the way of you being able to understand and receive the information. And sometimes you have to be able to admit that I was wrong on this point before, and this information, I need to change my thought process before that. And a lot of people, that's hard for them to do. Me being former military, I guess it's easy because when I was in the military, you're forced to have to break out of old habits you did, and you always have to deal with change and adjustment and readjustment. And then getting out of the military, it's a whole nother readjustment. And then I've traveled a lot also. So the readjustment and learning something new, I feel like more of us, that's more what we need to focus on than how smart we are and how much information we put together. The reevaluating things and open our mind and slowing things down and really thinking about them more clearly, because all the answers to all these lies and all these political games that are going on are right literally in our face. So just gotta start looking at it. Let's see, what did sign say there? There isn't enough till out there. Yeah. Well, I guess on this note, it's getting a little bit late. So we're gonna close it up. I'm thinking about also maybe bumping it up a little bit earlier. Maybe that'll help get some of these people in here. Well, not that I have any problems with my audience. I love you all, and especially getting the new viewers in here. When I start on Rockfin, we'll be able to talk a lot more freely, and I'm pretty sure Chris will enjoy that, taking the leash off of him and letting the big dog run around the yard. And so we're gonna let
you already know
more. I know he can't wait. Also, from being military, I'm used to being able to be diplomatic in my speech, as you all see. But the gloves are going to get taken off once we get on Rockfin. So buckle up. Some of the content on because it'll be the political matrix will be on Rockfin, and Hebrew apologetics with Marcus Cage will be on there also. What we've been thinking will stay on YouTube for as long as that one.
As long as it allows it to stay up.
Yeah, as long as they allow it to stay up. If they take it down, oh well. That's why if you all are not following me on gotta remember which one of those Twitter handles it is, but go to my main one and look at the one that has literally like the smallest amount of followers. That's the one where I'm uploading literally all of my videos from all of my different channels old and new. So you want to go back and find an old video, you go there, and literally on that channel, I'm not even going to retweet or any of that. It's just going to be literally the videos from all the different channels. So make sure to check that one out and follow me on that one. Also, if you have any questions, any topics that you all want us to talk about and bring up, please send it in to us. Especially when we get on to Rockfan next weekend, we're going to be we'll be freed up to speak more candidly about our true thoughts on some things. So we really, really look forward to that. Let's see what else. Veritas. I think you know what? If you're not following me on Twitter, please follow me. I'll make sure to follow you back. And I think it's a lot that we can have some fun conversations in the DM that maybe bring you on for a guest chat. I think that would be a lot of fun. So I guess I will close shop for tonight. I will be filming what we've been thinking tomorrow. Whether it's, I don't know, it might just be me. I'm not certain at this moment because I got a couple of things I do want to talk about. A lot of times when I go on by myself, Brandon Buchanan, he hops in there. It's a lot of fun. And then Chris, sometimes if he's not busy, he might pop in there also. You all know Root. She holds it down when she doesn't have things going on, and then of course we have Sade will pop her head in every now and then. But we also have, keep an eye out for, you might see Kit from Heartlands Media joining us a little bit more. Anthony Reyes, and of course Franco from Frank Analysis. So definitely looking forward to having them in the fold. And I'm definitely going to extend invitation and warm welcome to Nico House and invite him on. A lot of issues we'd love to have him talk about and chop it up with. So that said, yeah, sorry about the Chiefs, but we'll talk about that. I think it's a completely fixed, but that's a whole nother thing. But that said, this has been the Political Matrix. I am your host, Young Morpheus, also known as Marcus Cage, and I have next to me my good friends Chris and Emmanuel. You all have a great weekend, and those who will tune in to what we've been thinking, or it might be what I've been thinking, like a retro show, I will see you all tomorrow. And oh yeah, keep an eye out for content on Monday. I might go live, or I might just have a bunch of stuff that I will be uploading. So keep an eye out for all three channels dropping a lot of content. So look forward to it. That said, you guys have a good one. Thank you.
Have a good one, guys. Thanks.
Have a good one. Thanks for coming.